Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and of course, in today's video, we are heading out to the city of Vancouver in British Columbia. The Vancouver Canucks are about to lose their captain, and you guys may be wondering, what is Kevin talking about? We're going to get into that today. So the hot topic issue here over the past couple of days has been the status of the captain in Vancouver that shall remain nameless until now, and that is Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat is on the final year of his contract with the Vancouver Canucks, and considering the Vancouver Canucks salary cap situation and some recent updates, it doesn't look good for the Canucks keeping their captain in BC for next season. So this is the report. And it's definitely not the news that I think Canucks fans wanted to hear right now. So basically, the latest on Horvat, and let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Bo Horvat has rejected Vancouver's final offer on a new contract extension, and the team will now take the best trade offer for him, and that is from Rick Dhaliwal. It is believed that the offer came in at less than $8 million per season and a $64 million contract total. Horvat, who's 27 years old, has 20 goals and 29 points through 28 games this season. So he's over a point per game so far this year, played this season. And then according to Frank Saravelli, there is at least one team in the NHL that is willing to give him over $9 million per season in free agency. Now, with that kind of up in the air, there's a lot of questions about, well, what is the trickle-down effect of this? Actually, last week, after that report came out, Elias Pettersson was sent home after practice by head coach Bruce Boudreau, which kind of leads you into more speculation about what is going on inside that Canucks locker room. And it's probably an interesting time to be a fly on the wall right now in Vancouver because there's a lot of stuff going down. Now, if you guys have to understand the context of what has kind of transpired here in Vancouver in the situation with Bo Horvat. So Bo Horvat was a former first-round pick of the Vancouver Canucks and has turned into a guy that has really kind of stood the time in Vancouver. He's gone through a lot with this team. He's been through some ups. He's been through some mostly downs in his time in Vancouver. Earlier this season, he came out saying when they were on that losing streak, basically, he just feels like they are never going to win a game. Really saying things that kind of sound defeatist, but in his defense, you can't really blame him for thinking that way. And when you look at their current situation, he's kind of looking at this as, this is kind of my ticket out of here. And as sad as that is, it's kind of the reality of the situation right now for the Canucks. And when you look at their situation, they have a lot of money tied up in a lot of players that are not named Bo Horvat. And in order for them to create that money, it is going to be a little bit of it's almost like oh shit, we need to create the cap space now. And that's difficult to do. Because the problem is, you look at that deal that was under Jim Benning, that big trade they made, bringing in Connor Garland and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Between the two of them, they brought in $7.26 million per season until 2027 on Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and they inevitably re-signed Connor Garland, and they signed him to an extension that was $4.95 million per season. So you're looking at basically $12 million tied up in two hockey players there for a very long time. And Connor Garland, actually that deal doesn't look terrible, but it's just that money they could have really used right now. And when you look at also the situation around some of the other players on this team, there are other guys other than Horvat that have to get re-signed this year. Now you have to remember, coming into the year, they had to re-sign JT Miller. And kind of looking back, that was on Jim Rutherford. That was his decision to decide before the season started to sign Miller to that massive extension. And I thought at the time that was so oddly timed, because I understand from the Canucks perspective in the sense that you want to keep JT Miller and you don't want this noise all throughout the year. I understand that. But the problem with this is now you've created where it's going to have a domino effect on the rest of your team. And they kind of said, and this is what I said when I made the JT Miller video, a lot of you guys were actually pretty confident in the move. But here's the problem now. Now they don't have that $8 million to try and find a way to get a deal done for Bo Horvat. And they've kind of set out the sentiment that basically we're looking at a priority at JT Miller from what he did last year than our captain in Bo Horvat. And the fact that they re-signed JT Miller before Horvat kind of shows where their allegiance lies. And it doesn't look great right now through 30 games of this year. You have Bo Horvat, who's a point-per-game player. JT Miller is struggling and nowhere near the level he was last season. And just the overall context that, Bo Horvat is your captain. He's a guy that you kind of have rallied around the last couple years. And now you're going to have to let him walk in free agency. Because, even if the Canucks had offered him $8 million per year for a 7-year deal, even the problem with that, they're still over the salary cap for next season if they do that. But here's the even bigger issue, is that any move that they want to make is going to have to involve a trade. Because now you're in mid-season. You can't wait till next summer, right before let's just say, right, they solve this issue by buying out Oliver Ekman-Larsson next summer. Well, that's great, and you don't have to make a trade in order to keep Horvat. The problem with that is now you're running into the territory where Bo Horvat has all the leverage. It's past the trade deadline, so the Canucks can't trade him. He's going to look at offers throughout the entire National Hockey League and kind of evaluate where his stand is. And at that point, it doesn't matter if the Canucks have that OEL buyout money because Bo Horvat might pick another team anyway. And I think that's the real crux of the issue here for the Canucks, is they said in the preseason by re-signing JT Miller, they sent their allegiance to JT Miller over Bo Horvat. And at the time, I thought it was a questionable move. And even more so now, as we're almost halfway through this season, it looks even more likely that the Canucks made a mistake. Now, here's the thing. The fact that teams are willing to give $9 million to Bo Horvat per season, you have to look at the potential context of that. That is likely not a 7-year deal. That's probably a 3 or 4 year deal at $9 million. That's great, but he's not going to be getting that 7-year security that maybe Horvat's looking for at 27 years old. So that's part of the situation. Now again, that's the one alternative, is to buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson next summer to free out some money. You have to assume that's a huge reason why they're looking to trade Brock Boeser. And you want to talk about bad contracts that were signed? Yeah, bringing in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, not a great move. Re-signing Brock Boeser last summer after a questionable couple of seasons with injuries and stuff, yeah, that didn't look great either. And JT Miller. Brock Boeser is on that list too. Again, that was a Jim Rutherford guy that he re-signed. He doubled, the problem is with guys like Miller and Boeser, they could have easily said last summer, listen, I'm Jim Rutherford coming in after Jim Benning. Yeah, he made mistakes with the Oliver Ekman-Larssons and the Garlands and the Millers and the Boesers. I'm going to trade those guys out to free us up for some cap space, to keep Bo Horvat, to re-sign Niels Höglander, and to re-sign Andrei Kuzmenko next summer. Those should be the 3 priorities for the Canucks this coming offseason. Höglander, Kuzmenko, and Horvat. And funny enough, all 3 of those guys are still available and don't have contracts past this season. So where is this Canucks team? What are they thinking? Now, I understand from Kuzmenko and Höglander, there's no reason for them to re-sign yet. Kuzmenko hasn't played an NHL season, so he wants to see what he can even do in the National Hockey League. And depending on how things are going in Vancouver right now, he might say, yeah, I'm taking a trip to Vegas or Anaheim. Wherever he ends up going, he might say, I'm happy to be in North America. I just don't want to stay in Vancouver throughout this whole mess and turmoil that they're in. And Kuzmenko still has his ticket out. Höglander is still an RFA at 21 years old. He doesn't have to be re-signed yet. That's something they can decide in the summer, and that's not really something they have to worry about. He's not up for an offer sheet, so they don't have to worry about him yet. But the fact that Bo Horvat is still there, really, again, it just shows where the Canucks' priorities are. And if I'm Bo Horvat, are you sitting there thinking, listen, they re-signed JT Miller before me, and maybe it's nothing against JT Miller, but it's more, like I said, about the priorities of the Canucks organization. They prioritize, at the end of the day, they prioritize re-signing JT Miller or trading JT Miller before they prioritize re-signing Bo Horvat. And now they're in a spot where if they make a trade for Brock Besser, I think Canucks fans will be genuinely disappointed because they aren't going to get the value that they should get for a guy that, if he's healthy for a full season, can give you 30 to 35 goals per year, if not more. And I think that Canucks fans will be frustrated with that, but teams look at this and they say, listen, we know why you're trading Besser is because, figure out your Horvat situation and then we'll go get Besser. After you figure out your Horvat mess, whether you trade him or find a way to keep him under the cap. And that's not going to happen. Teams know that. And I think teams want to see what happens with Horvat first before they decide to swing back on Besser. And I think that's where the Canucks are kind of in a bind now. They can't make a move until they figure out the future of Horvat. And likely that future is him not sticking around. Now comes the question, where could Horvat end up? Now, I think there's a lot of teams that'll be interested in Bo Horvat. And I want you guys in the comments to give me a couple of mock trades for some of the Vancouver Canucks players, because I do want to do a video on that in terms of Bo Horvat, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Brock Besser. Those are really the three big names we've been hearing in terms of a trade. I want you guys to leave your mock trades down below because I've thrown videos out there about him going to Calgary, Brock Besser going to Calgary and things like that. And you guys are like, I don't see it. I don't see it either, but I want to see what you guys think because you have to think of it in this sense, specifically, twisting this back to Besser, you have to find a team that is willing to give up the right assets that Canucks fans want. Now, the problem is, what is the value of Besser? Is it a first-round pick and a decent prospect? Probably. That's probably what the Canucks will get for him. Now, again, is there a sign-and trade involved? Because then the Canucks maybe get more. But chances are, a team that's going to acquire Besser is going to, Horvat is going to be looking at it long-term. Chances are. And that's, if you're a Canucks fan, what you're hoping for. Is there enough teams out in the market that are not only willing to take Horvat as a rental, but for long-term, because they will, in fact, get more assets for him than if they are trading him as just a pure rental at the trade deadline. So some things to consider there. And then the question is, well, what teams have those assets for Horvat? Now, the problem is, I look at the Leafs as a team, and they mentioned this on Sportsnet Radio. And the problem with that is you have to find a team that he could play on the first power play, right? Because if you're giving up a lot of good assets, and you look at a situation like Toronto, who do you take off of the power play? Because you're not bringing in Horvat to play the last 30 seconds of a power play, right? And that's something that you have to look at as well. This isn't an NHL game, right? This isn't be a GM mode. This is real life. And if you're going to, you have to look at this even from the ownership. Selling to the ownership as the GM, right? If you're Kyle Dubas selling this proposal to, Brendan Shanahan and the ownership in Toronto, you have to sell them that Horvat is worth giving up the first and whatever other assets they need to acquire. But then if they come back and say, well, he's not going to play on the first power play, he's not, maybe he plays more penalty kill, but again, he's a goal scorer. He's already got 9 power play goals this year. He should be on the top power play for wherever he goes. It's not worth justifying that move. Honestly, that's the reality. And the Leafs already have good centers. They have Matthews. They have Tavares. So Horvat now becomes a third-line checking center, why are you getting Horvat then? Get somebody that'll cost you, say, a second and third round pick that can do that same role as a third line player, like a Jean-Gabriel Pageau, like the Islanders got a couple years ago. But you saw the price tag of that. That was not a second and third round pick. You were still giving up the value of what a Brock Besser could potentially cost, right? The Islanders were criticized for giving up a lot for Pageau a couple years ago. And to some points, it does look kind of true. But again, that's the market. That's how this works. So, again, if I look at some teams, I mean, I think the Islanders are out. I think the Islanders have enough centers. Nelson and Barzal, same situation as the Leafs. Is Horvat a third-line center? It's probably not worth bringing him in. You've already got Pageau and Bailey that can play center in your top six. So you don't need a guy to play wing that is a center. You know, a center that can play wing. Or Beauvillier. All those guys have played center in the past. So the Islanders don't need that. Detroit. You know what? Detroit makes sense too. But again, they have a similar situation in the sense that they already have two great centers in Andrew Kopp and Dylan Larkin. So, in the grand scheme of things, where does Horvat fit? He's got to go to a team that needs a second-line center or a top six center and can play top-minute power play. That's really where he's going to end up. And is that maybe New Jersey on the wing? I could see that. I think New Jersey makes sense. Again, yeah, they have the same issue in terms of they have a lot of guys that can play, right? Down the middle. They've got Hughes. They've got Hischier. But he's a guy that could jump to the wing and be a huge impact on the wing as a winger there. And again, he could also play on the penalty kill a significant amount. And he might be able to get that top power play, right? I mean, just the idea of Hughes, Hischier, and a guy like that in Horvat, I mean, I would take that any day of the week. And again, you've still got Alexander Holtz, and you've still got Jesper Bratt. So the Devils are not lacking in that category, right? So, I don't know, it's one of those things that I think the Canucks really have to find the right trade partner. That's going to be their most difficult thing, and that's going, if there is a market for him, the value for him will go up. If there's a lot of teams interested and there's a bidding war, his value will go up and the Canucks will get a decent package for him. But other than that, we shouldn't, again, it comes back to the point of poor management by the Canucks in now two different regimes. I hate to say it. Listen, yeah, you could blame Rutherford for this, but some of the mess was on Jim Benning too, right? The Ekman-Larsens, the Myers contract. God, thank God that's only got 2 years left. That's a bad contract. Like, that is a significant amount of money in guys that are not going to get you to the promised land of even making the playoffs. God forbid we talk about the Canucks back in the Stanley Cup final like 2010. They just need to get back to the playoffs consistently before we even have that discussion. And I've even heard rumors about Thatcher Demko. What is Thatcher Demko's future here? Because, again, he's back on the IR. He's injured. And they have goaltender prospects that, let's be honest, they're probably looking at Mikey DiPietro at some point. Oh my God, they traded Michael DiPietro. I forgot about that. Wow. That's a sobering reminder of the Vancouver Canucks organization. Unbelievable. So, that could have been a fix, right? You trade out Demko and keep Mikey DiPietro. I know he didn't play that well, but again, these are the ways that they had ways of getting out of this situation, and they've just kind of just thrown together the puzzle without actually putting the pieces together properly. And this is what you end up with. So let me know what you guys think down below. Like I said, leave some mock trades down below for the Canucks, where you guys think some of these guys could end up. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.